Can you tell me where?
Fala pessoal, eu sou Kelvin Araújo, estamos aqui em mais um vídeo do nosso canal e hoje não apenas um vídeo, como vocês já devem ter visto aí no título, mas uma entrevista em si. Antes de eu falar mais detalhes sobre a entrevista que nós fizemos, eu quero que vocês façam o procedimento padrão de sempre, abrir o vídeo, deixar o like, ativem o sininho para as notificações, se inscrevam no canal caso vocês não sejam inscritos e por favor nos sigam nas nossas outras redes sociais, Facebook, PROGLand, Instagram, PROG_land. Se você conhece ou produz música, por favor, nos envie música pela nossa plataforma do Groover e também, por último, mas não menos importante, nos acesse via nosso site proglandmusica.wordpress.com. Lá tem resenhas exclusivas feitas pelo nosso colaborador Thiago Menezes e também entrevistas nas quais vocês não vão poder ver aqui por algum motivo e outros conteúdos adicionais também. Introdutório feito, eu vou falar um pouco da entrevista que nós fizemos hoje, aqui que nós temos aqui no nosso canal, que foi a entrevista com Bryan Beller, baixista do Aristocrats, tocou com diversos outros músicos que vão de nomes como Joe Satriani, Steve Vai, até o próprio James Labrie do Dream Theater e também com vários outros músicos, além do Aristocrats, trio de música instrumental que ele forma desde 2011 com Guthrie Govan na guitarra e o Marco Minnemann na bateria, esses também outros músicos de currículo extensíssimo como ele, né? E essa entrevista faz parte de um momento oportuno da banda que está lançando um novo álbum conceitual, Duke, de 2024, que fala da história de um pato com elementos policialescos e etc, né? Isso mesmo que você ouviu, e na entrevista a gente fala de onde surgiu esse conceito e etc. E também porque, além disso, além do lançamento desse disco mais recente, o grupo está vindo agora para o Brasil para a turnê de suporte ao disco. A Duke Tour é a primeira passagem da banda em 9 anos, né? E o grupo vai fazer 2 datas agora em agosto. Eles vão começar a etapa dia 20 em Curitiba e dia 22 em São Paulo. Eu vou deixar aqui nos comentários fixados o link da matéria do nosso site que a gente fez falando dos shows e etc. E apresentando um pouco as bases do Aristocrats para quem não é fã, conheceu, para quem conhece pouco e quer conhecer mais, enfim, né? E foi uma entrevista muito boa, a gente falou do Aristocrats, falamos do processo de trabalho dele com esses diferentes nomes, esses diferentes guitarristas, sobretudo. Falamos também sobre o disco solo dele, né, o Scenes from the Flood, um álbum conceitual maravilhoso que ele lançou em 2019, um dos melhores discos de progressivo daquele ano. A gente fala um pouco disso na entrevista. E também falamos principalmente de baixo, né? Ele como bom baixista, sobre técnicas de baixo, sobre baixistas contemporâneos dele, que ele admira e etc, e coisas do gênero. Enfim, eu espero que vocês gostem da entrevista e deixem aí nos comentários o que vocês acham, o que vocês acharam do papo. Fiquem com a entrevista. Here he is, Bryan Beller from Aristocrats, played with James Labrie, with Joe Satriani and 1,000 other artists. Really thank you for your patience and your time. I would like to start this interview talking about, of course, the most recent album from Aristocrats, Duke. And when I knew about this album, really something intrigued me because it's a wildly original concept for an album. It's a sort of a detective action story involving a Duke, narrated instrumentally from the band or whatever. And I would like to ask you, where did the idea of this album come from, had came?
Well, we accidentally stumbled into it. It wasn't originally designed to be a concept album about a duck. But what happened, Marco brought in a song called Sitting with a Duck on a Bay. And then when we were in the studio, he came up with another idea, which was kind of like a much faster tempo, more kind of complicated musical motif than the duck song was. And I proposed to him, I said, there's this other song that you wrote called And Then There Were Just Us. And this end that you wrote kind of sounds like it belongs in the end of that song. And Marco said, well, that's funny because I kind of named this part Duck's End. And then we said, well, if Duck's End could go at the end of the album and the Duck song's in the beginning of the album. And then we laughed and we were like, oh, okay, so we're making a concept album about a duck. And then we were like, wait a minute. So at that point, we tried to imagine what all of the songs, which already had titles, would be like if they were a part of a story about a duck, as opposed to all the songs being about things that happened to us as the band members as usual.
Yeah.
As usual. And then, we all started making up the story as we went along. So that's how it happened.
This is the Aristocrats' sixth album. Your guys are the one of those rare supergroups with a real longevity, a kind of continuity, not a just one-off or that kind of supergroups who vanished for 56,000 years before coming back 60,000 years later for a comeback album or whatever. What do you think that explains the non-stop drive in the band? What, in your point of view, uh, makes the band so enduring with a series of albums, series of tours with orchestra? That live album with orchestra is really cool, and
Thank you.
other things.
I'm not here to explain why people like us. That's for the fans to describe, not us. All we can do is just show up and make a record and go on tour and play a show and hope people like it. We knew from the beginning that we didn't want to call ourselves Govan, Beller, Minnemann or whatever, just because that's the right away there, it's a project and not a band. There's nothing wrong with projects, by the way. I don't want to down talk anybody or anybody else.
Yeah.
It's just a different thing. And we thought, let's be a band. Let's present ourselves as a band. And Guthrie was the one who was the most adamant about it. So we made the album, and then in the first album, everybody paid a lot of attention to it, which was very nice. But we didn't go on tour really for the first album because schedules, and we just didn't really, we were kind of surprised at how successful the first album was. And we all had other gigs. And so by the time we got caught up to it, we made the second album, which was Culture Clash. And then we came up with a plan. Okay, let's go on tour and see like what's really out there for us. Like, are we going to be a successful band or not? And it worked. And then once it worked once and we went around the world, we were like, well, let's do it again. Like, why wouldn't we want to do it again?
I would like to ask about that thing with the orchestra. That it's something really different from what the people's always thought of Aristocrats, but at the same time, it definitely preserves a lot of things from the band, a lot of characteristics from the band. Were you guys fearful or nervous about playing with an orchestra and whatever, because you guys are really slimmed down approach as a trio, and all of a sudden you have loads of of different degrees of different colors of sound. You have the cellos, the violins, the horns playing with along with you guys. How was the preparation, the mental process of, well, wait a minute, we're playing with orchestra or whatever?
Well, I don't know if you know this or not, but we never actually played with the orchestra. So what this, first of all, you have to remember, this was during lockdown.
Oh yeah.
So what happened was that there was an orchestra that did an arrangement of Culture Clash on their own. They just did it, and they had their own guitarist, and it was a small chamber orchestra. It was the Primus Chamber Orchestra, and they did a version of Culture Clash, and then basically wrote to Guthrie and said, "Hey, look, we're a big fan of the band and this song, and we wanted to show you this." And then Guthrie shared it with me and Marco, and he was like, "This could be an interesting project. Like, what if there were more songs that were arranged by this orchestra?" And then lockdown happened. And so at that point, we said, let's start talking to them and see like what it would look like. And so we were trying to figure out exactly how it was going to work. Like, okay, if they were going to write an arrangement, what were they going to write an arrangement to? Well, probably the studio version. But the thing was, the arrangements were kind of written with the studio version in mind. And so if we played them again, then it would have been this endless chasing, like, oh, now the band version is different. Well, maybe the orchestra arrangement doesn't work anymore. Maybe we need to rewrite it. So what we decided to do to stop all that was just to have the orchestra write an arrangement and then see if it would work with the original recordings remixed, not just like remastered and like the orchestra on top. Like, go back to the beginning, take the multi-tracks from square one and give them to Forrester Saville, who is our wonderful engineer that we use now, and see if he can create something that isn't just the orchestra on top of what we had, but actually feels new. And it sounds like from what you're saying that that's exactly the way that it showed up, because, you know, those recordings, they're the same ones that are on the album, but they don't sound like the album because they've been remixed. And of course, the orchestra is on top of it. Now, our original mix engineer, Mark Minnemann, did a great job with the first album at Culture Clash. And we have another guy who did Tres Caballeros. But it's good that we had somebody different to bring that project to life. Because once we heard the orchestra playing live their arrangement on top of our remixed tracks, we were like, it's done. We don't need to play this again. As a matter of fact, we'd probably just make it worse. So that's how that happened. And it's a testament to the orchestra and to our mixing engineer, Forrester. And also, thankfully, I don't mean to be immodest, but the songs, the strength of the songs were able to carry these new arrangements in their original form. So I'm glad that it worked for people. It was one of those things that Guthrie was his original idea, and then Marco and I joined in, and then we did it as an idea of something that we could do during lockdown, because we couldn't get together because Guthrie lived in England and we live in the United States. There was no way to get together anyway.
I would like to now to move to a subject, a particular subject of yours, which is about the bass playing. You once said in an interview that you realized that the most important thing about playing the bass is the tone. And this is something quite underrated by many bass players. And I would like to ask, what another important aspect of bass playing, let's put that, do you think this somewhat underrated or overlooked, but is secondly after the tone important to the bass players? I really enjoyed that perspective about the
Yeah.
tone and
Well,
what
yeah,
the sound.
the sound is so important, especially in a trio where the bass has to take up more space than usual. I could say the groove, but you're asking for an underrated. I mean, every bass player talks is about the groove, right? So
Yeah.
I think that it's the idea of the bass player as a song arranger, in that the way a song develops, I think the bass player has a responsibility to be a bit conservative in the beginning of the composition, so that when certain themes and melodies and sections of the song come back later, that they can add things and make the listener feel like the story has been moving forward. And there are a lot of ways to do that with a slight reharmonization or a fill or a change in the groove or whatever. But I think it's an important aspect of the bass to be kind of a song steering wheel, if you will.
Yeah. You played with a lot of names. a lot of really, really, really high quality names, and especially about high quality guitar players: Steve
Yeah.
Vai, Joe Satriani, Guthrie Govan, Dweezil Zappa, Mike Kennelly. What do you see as the key differences in the working of these lead guitarists, these composers too,
They're all
and
so different.
arrangers?
I mean, like, the only thing they have in common is that they play guitar. That's it. Well, actually, the funny thing is the only thing the other they have in common is Joe Satriani, Steve Vai, and Mike Keneally are all from the same part of Long Island, New York, like within 10 miles of each other. That's a very strange, and so is John Petrucci, by the
Wow.
way. That's a very strange coincidence. We all say, what was in
Wow.
the water over there? Are they guitarists in Long Island in 1962 or whatever? I don't know what was going on there. But uh, every one of those guitarists has a completely unique thing that makes them great. Uh, you know, Dweezil Zappa is kind of a special case because when I was in Dweezil's band, he was very, very, very into Eddie Van Halen, and he was young. I mean, like, he was only in his mid-20s. He eventually grew into a much more developed guitarist and musician, as we all did, after we left our 20s. But we were doing a lot of stuff that was like very kind of Van Halen-y and also kind of muso riffy. He was listening to a lot of King's X at the time. Cool stuff. But his artistry was not fully developed at the time. Joe Satriani, of course, I joined him when his artistry was fully developed, and we all know the thing about Joe. It's tone, but also melody. The really kind of simpler song structures, but the powerful, emotional, simple statement of melody in his songs is always the trademark Joe thing. And so when you're playing a Joe Satriani song, even though of course Joe can shred, the song structure is one of those things where you almost have to think like you're playing a pop song as a bass player to make sure that you don't do too much, interfere with what he's doing. And then when he wants to jam, you got to be able to push it in there and really kind of be like a rootsy kind of player, because that's what he's coming from, almost like an R&B standpoint, because he used to be in an R&B band when he was a kid. So, and I like that because, I was born to play Led Zeppelin and Stevie Wonder. I don't know how I ended up playing all this, shreddy music. Steve Vai is completely different. Steve Vai is a Frank Zappa disciple. Obviously he can do all the hard rock stuff and shred, and he has his own artistry, which is very, very through composed, modern classical, and it's a high wire act. We're all playing very, very difficult stuff. You have to play it right. A lot of times there's only one way to do it, and there's an emphasis on playing it accurately, even though it's impossible, and you're kind of like making the impossible circus act happen. That's kind of the Steve Vai thing. And with Guthrie, it's like, Guthrie's compositional sense is that he's very, very dense. He is obviously the most complicated harmonic compositions of the three Aristocrats. You'll recognize a Guthrie song, you hear a lot of dense chords and stuff like that. But he's also the quickest thinker of any guitarist I've ever played with, and that includes Mike Keneally, which is crazy to say because Mike Keneally is a very quick thinker too. But Guthrie is just, the amount of time it takes for an idea to go from his head to his hand is zero. And so when you're playing with him live, you have to be ready for anything at any time. He'll get thrown something funny and all that. But, his versatility and his quick thinking are the things that make Guthrie. His technique's obviously flawless, but it's the other two things I think that make him really unique. And Mike Keneally is like, a lot of people don't know enough about Mike Keneally's solo albums. There are so many of them, and he's a cross between Frank Zappa and the
Pretty
Beatles
amazing.
and XTC and Yes and Gentle Giant. He's prog, pop, Frank Zappa, modern classical, completely bizarre avant-garde. It's like, and you don't know what direction he's going to go at what time. And the songs are just, on the studio versions, are just templates anyway. He will really, really become experimental with a live version of a song, considerably more so than the Aristocrats, which is saying something. I mean, he'll walk a song all the way out on the ledge, and maybe it even falls over the ledge, and he likes that. So when you're playing his gig, you have got to be looking and listening at all times for anything, because even a song form can change at a moment's notice. And he also plays guitar. He plays guitar and keyboards and sings. So that's a very, very unique gig. And I'm glad that I'm going to get to play some gigs with him this October in the classic lineup. Me and Joe Travers on drums and Rick Masalem on guitar for the first time in many, many years. And it's only in the United States. It's only a couple shows, but I'm very excited about that.
You play with is about the guitar players. Is there any guitarist you haven't played with yet that you would really like to play? I
John
know there's a
Schofield.
plenty.
John Schofield.
Oh,
Michael Landau. You know,
I
those are
would
those are
love
the,
to hear a collaboration between you and John McLaughlin, but I think
oh
this
God,
can be
yeah. I mean, he'd be
decided
great. I don't know if I can play fast enough to play with John McLaughlin.
You can.
I'm
You certainly
serious.
can.
Some of that stuff is hauling ass. And Hadrian Farad, by the way, I know this guy's played with him a lot. He's such a great bass player. Uh, and I think Yannick Wisdala played some gigs with him too.
Yeah.
A lot of guys that he has are really extreme technique guys. Just I've noticed that. So
Yeah. I would like to ask about you about a solo record that you had done, which I worship. I really
oh,
was
thank you,
pleasantly surprised about Scenes from the Flood in 2019. For me, is one of the best releases of that year.
thank you.
That concept album, really perfect from the top to bottom. Was it challenging to produce that album? Is there any chance of follow up?
First of all, for anybody not watching, uh,
Really?
I this Scenes from the Flood was my third solo album. I put one out in 2003 and 2008, and then a live album of my own stuff in 2011. And then the Aristocrats happened, and then Joe Satriani happened, and everything just exploded. I didn't have any time to really think about my own things, and I was writing original music for the Aristocrats anyway, so a lot of it was going there. But in 2014 and 2015, I started to have ideas for a big concept album, and I'd always wanted to do that, like something as big as like The Wall, which is such an arrogant thing to say. Who can write something like that? But I started making notes and jotting down ideas, and one song led to another, and I started having concepts, and started making demos in 2017, and by the time I had it all demoed out, it was 18 songs and 88 minutes, and it was 4 sides. It was an actual double album, and it took I had to take a year off of the road to do nothing but make the demos for that album. I didn't work at all. I just did this album. It was a big investment, and everybody was very kind. I got a lot of different people to play on it. Joe Satriani did one song. John Petrucci did a solo in a song. Guthrie did a song. Mike Keneally did a couple of songs. I had a bunch of great drummers. Gene Hogan from Def Clock, Ray Hearn from Haken, and Joe Travers, my dear friend, who's done a lot of things with Dweezil Zap and everything. It's a big, long. It's not like the Aristocrats at all. It's a big, long, heavy, serious instrumental concept album, and I was really working out a lot of personal stuff, and it actually is a bit dark, you know. I mean, it's just kind of a heavy thing. I mean, I'm a big fan of Pink Floyd and Nine Inch Nails, and I think that probably showed up on that record along with some other influences of mine. Anyway, it's kind of you to bring it up, and it has been out for 6 years now. I was going to do some shows for it in 2020 and 2021, and then of course that wasn't possible, and then everything got crazy after that, so I haven't been able to get back to that. But I just put out a new EP, which is remixes of it's called Calm Before the Storm, which is 3 remix songs from my album before Scenes from the Flood, an album called Thanks in Advance, and 2 of those songs ended up on the Aristocrats live album because we needed songs to make a show in the beginning. We didn't have enough songs in the first album. Greasy Wheel and Cave Dweller were songs that are on Boing We'll Do It Live, and the original versions I felt like always could have had a better mix, and now they have one. And then there was another song from that album called Love, Terror, Adrenaline, which has Marco on drums, which is the only song I've ever had Marco play on my solo catalog. It was 2007. It was 4 years before the Aristocrats started. And it's this 10-minute ridiculous progressive epic, and Mike Keneally's on guitar. So I took these 3 songs and I remixed them, and that's on Bandcamp now. And because I'm kind of wanting to get back into the spirit of some of the solo stuff, and the question that you asked is, do I have more? I do have enough material in my head for another album. It's not going to be a double album, but I feel like it may be about 35, 40 minutes. I already know the song titles. I already know the album title. I kind of know this is what happens to me. This is what was going on with Scenes from the Flood. I had the whole album in my head. It was crazy. And I just needed a year to get it out. And so that's what I have now again with this new album. I have about 6 songs that I just need to get out of me. It's going to take a while because it always takes me a while. It takes me a long time. But I'm going to start working on it soon.
Yeah. About tech, you're a very technique-oriented musician. Do you still listen and rediscover new things from the other bass players? Is there anyone nowadays that you, Bryan Beller, personally made you think, oh, this guy's amazing bass player. I had not noticed him before. Do you discover these new bass players or this rediscover older bass players?
Well,
Whatever.
I will be
In terms of
100%
technique.
honest. And it's funny that you say that I'm a technique oriented player because that's actually not accurate. I have never been a technique oriented player. I always just wanted to play songs. And unlike Marco and Guthrie and a lot of people in our genre, I did not start playing at 4 years old and practice 10 hours a day so that by the time I was 18, I was already this insane prodigy. That was not me. I only started playing bass when I was 13. And I just was playing songs. I learned Led Zeppelin songs and some Rush songs I wanted to be able to play. I never learned extended technique. I never learned the Billy Sheehan stuff. I never learned the Stu Ham stuff. So when I started having to play with these really advanced technique guys, I really had to kind of catch up. And, I've done my best and I am who I am and I'm not who I'm not. And that's fine. So when I see somebody like, say, Mohini Day, I'm just like, my God, like, how do you even do that? But like, it doesn't make me go back and kind of want to reinvent my technique because I feel like I know who I am. And at the risk of being incurious, I know what I'm good at, and I feel like relying on my strengths is probably the best way for me to go at this point in my life. Mohini Day is an amazing bass player. Toby Peterson from the Omnific. I don't know if people are into that. He's kind of taken the Victor Wooten thing to the next level. It's a combination of like that modern gent kind of bass style, the kind of grindy thing you hear, the ding wall with the, with the neural DSP kind of overdriven tone. But like he's got that thumb under thing and the slap, and then he can do melodic stuff on top. That's really, really cool. I met him. He's amazing. Guys like Dan Briggs from Between the Bear and Me, he's not doing like anything like groundbreaking technique, but his technique is just the fundamentals are just excellent. And so I like guys like that. And of course the Charles Berthods and, guys like that, what can you say? You just watch them and you just go, but that's the way it always is. I just jammed. I went back to Berklee College of Music and I jammed with Victor for a scholarship award presentation thing there. And Victor's ridiculous, like Victor can do a million things, but usually the million things that you can do in that kind of context, when you're playing just a basic jam, that doesn't really matter. Like what comes out is just like plain old musicality. Can you just play a song, make it musical, play a melody, play a solo, that kind of stuff. Yeah. Unless you're in your own specialized element that really features the crazy extended technique. And sure, there's a lot of that. But I like getting in situations where you can just mix it up with players and just play kind of classic tunes. And I feel like that's where I feel most comfortable and most musical. And one of the things I love about the Aristocrats to bring this home is that I feel like it's a great bridge between, we're doing the crazy extended technique stuff, whatever. But then, like, in the end, if you just kind of deconstruct what we're doing, a lot of it is we're just grooving. We're just grooving and Guthrie's just soloing, and it's just not a very, very complicated. We're not playing jazz. We're not blowing over 20 million complicated chord changes or anything like that. It's just rock with some fusion.
But there's a technique in doing a great groove,
It
requires technique too. That I say that sense because you had a versatility. You can play the parts to more groovy things. That's I.
Well, I think that's a sense of time. That's a sense of time. Like that. And I feel like that's kind of a fundamental. That every musician should have a good sense of time and be able to translate it to their hands and how they express on the instruments. Like if you don't have that to start with, you're going to have a lot of challenges in playing music with other people. So I feel like that's a really important thing. I'm grateful because the person who taught me how to groove and taught me what time was John Bonham from listening to Led Zeppelin albums. I feel like I had a really good teacher.
Yeah. It's important as a bass player, you have such a reference as a drummer because it's rhythmic, it's the groove, it's the timbre and the tempo and whatever.
I used to sit in my room when I was a kid and pretend I was John Bonham playing Kashmir. which is like the simplest song, right? Just do
Yeah.
gosh, 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 you know, but it's the way that you do it. It's the feel that you do it with. It's the time and the groove that he did that with. That was everything to me. And that's why I always wanted to play along with that song, because it was so simple, but there was such a heavy groove feel to it.
Last question. If you could define your style as a musician and composer too, of course, in one sentence or word or whatever, what would it be?
Emotion. You know, I want my favorite music. I think everybody's favorite music. When you listen to it, your favorite stuff, you are emotionally attached to it. It does something to you that makes you feel something inside. Could be happiness, sadness, depth, just whatever it is. I know that, like, one of my favorite songs in the world is "Dogs" by Pink Floyd, and like when we get to the end of that song, man, I am every single time we get there, I'm so moved, and I've heard it 1,000 times.
That acoustic intro was something from other world, and the lyrics and the crescendo, the solos.
That's why I always go back to Pink Floyd, because I feel like there's a reason why, even though they were writing a lot of instrumentally minded stuff, why they became so worldwide popular at the biggest level. It's because the sound of them and the way that their compositions worked emotionally moved people. And people were able to invest their own emotional content into the music and get something from it that was theirs. And that, like Pink Floyd, the music didn't belong to Pink Floyd anymore. It belongs to everybody now. Yeah. And that's what I want to provide as a composer and as a musician. You know, a song like, whether it's a song like Flatlands, which connected with a lot of people, or it's a ridiculous song like This Is Not Scrotum on the new album. You know, I want to do something that people can have an emotional connection to. Not always a heavy one. Obviously, in my own solo work, there's more heavy emotional stuff. But like just something that you, whether it's joy or craziness or just something about the melody, the groove, the song, the music, the sound of the whole thing. I call it the one note. Like as a band, I feel like every band has a sound. It's just one note. It's the sound of that band. It's the sound of the band.
Yeah.
So that's what I hope.
You said about Pink Floyd, and and I remember the intro from Echoes, that ping. It's one note that changes everything.
Yeah, and if I can write anything that has 1% of the impact of a composition like Echoes or Dogs or Comfortably Numb or something like that, then I can die happy, because that's why we're doing this. The play, everybody gets caught up in the playing, but I feel like people remember songs, right?
Yeah.
So hopefully that's what we're providing when people come to see the show. Yeah, they'll see us go blah, blah, blah on the fretboard and whatever, but hopefully they see a song, you know, that connects with them, like Desert Tornado or Culture Clash or Flatlands, you know, just something that they remember and they want to hear again and again.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Bryan. Love to welcome you in your interviews, talking about your solo stuff, more of that thing, because I love for Pink Floyd and I love everything.
Absolutely. So stay in touch. It's ready, you know, hit me up.
Yeah. Be sure. Thank you. Bye.
All right, bye. Thank you.